both numbing and tingling?
Yes, it is getting colder, yes.
Half of the participants were randomly assigned to use their left hand first, the other half used their right hand first. They indicated in real time how much discomfort they were experiencing.
Let's go ahead, Professor. Yes.
It feels cold. I wouldn't want to stay there for very long.
Are you from Russia?
Yes.
So you're used to it. I used to cold though.
At the end of the trial, I told them to pull their hand out and give an overall rating for the experience. Consider a family with 6 children. Is it more likely that they were born in the order boy, 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 girl, 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 or girl, boy, boy, girl, boy, girl? For the majority of participants, the first order was viewed as significantly less likely. But in reality, both orders are equally likely, but boy, 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 girl, girl, girl feels less likely because it seems less random. I mean, people have a mental model of randomness, and boy, 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 girl, girl, girl does not fit this model. We rely on representativeness all the time as a mental shortcut, but sometimes it can lead us astray. One famous example, developed by Kahneman and Tversky, is known as the Linda problem. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and she also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. So, which is more probable? Linda is a bank teller, or Linda is a bank teller and is active in the tellers community? The majority of people who are asked this question give the second answer, which makes sense because the description of Linda matches our mental model of feminism. But mathematically, it must be more likely that she's a bank teller, because feminist bank teller is just a subset of bank teller. All feminist bank tellers are, by definition, bank tellers. Stephen Jay Gould said, "I know that a conjoint statement is least probable, yet a little homunculus in my head continues to jump up and down, shouting at me, but she can't just be a bank teller. Read the description." The thing about the representativeness heuristic, like many heuristics, is that we fall for it even if we are aware that we're falling for it. I mean, technically, eggplants, cucumbers, and avocados are all berries. But because they aren't small and sweet like strawberries or blueberries, we don't think of them as berries. An eggplant does not match my preconceived idea of berries, so even though I know that it's technically a berry, I'm going to keep calling it a vegetable. I mean, the salient feature of eggplant is that I cook it like I would. Also, normally enough, a strawberry is not technically a berry. Botany is confusing. So the representativeness heuristic is why we think that Linda is more likely to be a feminist bank teller rather than just a bank teller, and why I can't bring myself to call an eggplant a berry. And representativeness is how the peak moments in our past come to represent entire experiences. But it's not the only thing that colors our perception of the past. Our brains better recall and therefore assign a greater importance to more recent events. This is known as recency bias. So if you were to list all the meals you had in the last week, it would be easier to recall the most recent ones. That's why how an experience ends plays an outsized role in how it's remembered. I mean, how many people are rewatching Game of Thrones right now, for example, compared to, say, Breaking Bad? I mean, the last season of Game of Thrones was so awful, I don't think I'll ever watch any of it ever again. The end tainted my view of the whole thing. And it seems like that also applies when judging the quality of a life. In a 2001 study, researchers told a fictional story about Jen, a never-married woman without children. She's extremely happy. She has a job she enjoys, many close friends, goes on vacations, and has many fulfilling hobbies. Then she is hit by a car at the age of 30 and dies painlessly and instantly. Taking her life as a whole, how desirable do you think Jen's life was? For the other half of participants, researchers told the same story about Jen, but added another 5 years to her life. Years that were pleasant, but maybe not quite as good as the first 30. Then they asked the same question. Taking her life as a whole, how desirable do you think Jen's life was? And what they found was that people judged Jen's longer life to be less desirable. That living for those extra 5 good but not great years actually reduced the overall perceived quality of her life. The ending matters. They repeated this same story with a Jen that lives to age 60 compared to age 65, and the results were the same. Adding mildly pleasant years to a very positive life does not enhance it, but actually decreases the perception of the quality of this life. So when it comes to holding your hand in a bucket of cold water, your overall experience of the event boils down to 2 things. The peak and the we're more likely to do it again, and that improves long-term health. Add an interval of diminishing pain to the end of a medical procedure. The whole benefit of the added pain is to cause the patients to retain a more favorable memory of it. In 2003, Kahneman did exactly that. Along with colleagues, he conducted a trial with 682 patients who underwent a colonoscopy. They went through a normal the other half had an extra 60 minutes at the end of the procedure where the tip of the colonoscope was left in but not moved. So it was uncomfortable but less painful than the rest of the procedure. The patients who experienced the extra 3 minutes of discomfort at the end rated the whole experience as about 10% less unpleasant. They were also more likely to come back to do a follow-up screening procedure. The peak end rule also appears in design for customer experiences. A cheap, tasty hot dog or ice cream cone leads to a better memory of the whole shopping experience. It's like a doctor giving a lollipop to a child after a checkup. Knowing that this is how the brain creates memories for ourselves. Do you want to run more? Don't do painful hill sprints at the end of your workout. Instead, maybe do a pleasant cool-down walk while you talk to a friend or listen to your favorite music. Want to create better memories of your vacations? Making it longer won't matter as much as creating exciting and novel days. Make sure there's a high peak experience and also end it with something pleasant. Are you quitting your job and want people to remember you fondly? Or make sure you are extra nice to your colleagues during your last few weeks. In short, to create better memories, fuse from N to P and fall into the holes in the p-type. This makes the p-type a little negatively charged and the n-type a little positively charged. So there is now an electric field inside an inert piece of material. Electrons keep diffusing until the electric field becomes so large it prevents them from crossing over. Now we have established the depletion region, an area depleted of mobile charge carriers. There are no electrons in the conduction band and no holes in the valence band. If you connect a battery the wrong way to this diode, it simply expands the depletion region until its electric field perfectly opposes that of the battery, and no current flows. But if you flip the polarity of the battery, then the depletion region shrinks, the electric field decreases, and electrons can flow from N to P. When an electron falls from the conduction band into a hole in the valence band, that band gap energy can be emitted as a photon. The energy change a couple of atoms. Nakamura joined the lab for a year to master MOCVD, but his time there was miserable. He wasn't allowed to use the working MOCVD, so he spent 10 of his 4 months assembling almost from scratch. Even worse, his labs shunned him because Nakamura didn't have a doctorate, nor any academic papers to his name, as Nishida didn't allow publishing. His lab mates, all PhD researchers, dismissed him as a lowly technician. This experience fueled him. Nakamura wrote, "I feel resentful when people look down on me. I developed more fighting spirit. I would not allow myself to be beaten by such people." He returned to Japan in 1989 with 2 things in hand. One, an order for a brand new MOCVD reactor for Nishida, and 2, a fervent desire to get his PhD. At that time in Japan, you could earn a PhD without having to go to university, simply by publishing other papers. Nakamura had always known his chances of inventing a blue LED were low, but now he had a backup plan. Even if he didn't succeed, he could at least get his PhD. But now the question was, with MOCVD under his belt, which material should he research? By this time, scientists had narrowed the options down to 2 main candidates, zinc selenide and gallium nitride. These were both semiconductors with band gaps theoretically in the blue light range. Zinc selenide was the far more promising option. When grown in an MOCVD reactor, it had only a 0.3% lattice mismatch with its substrate, gallium arsenide. Therefore, zinc selenide crystal had about 1,000 defects per square centimeter, within the upper limit for LED function. Its only issue was that while scientists had figured out multiple different ways to create N-type zinc selenide, no one knew how to create P-type. In contrast, saw dead ends, he saw potential solutions. So if you're looking for a free and easy way to start building these skills for yourself right now, look no further than today's sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant will make you a better thinker and problem.
Unearthed a series of startling clues. The fossils of sea creatures, freshwater shells buried in sand, ancient settlements with human remains. Clear evidence that this stark landscape hides a turbulent past. One that would alter the course of human history and provide a dramatic new chapter in the story of how the Earth was made in water.
It's a piece of evidence that this area, now desert, was once underneath the ocean. You think about the construction of the pyramid, but not necessarily about what it's made of in these gorgeous fossils.
The Sahara now is the world's biggest dust bowl, but the tiny Nummulites fossils suggest that it was once very different, that perhaps there could have been water in this barren wilderness. Smith heads further inland to investigate this extraordinary idea. She travels to a remote desert valley near where the pyramid stones were quarried. It's called Wadi al-Hitan. Spread out in the sand lie hundreds of fossils, first excavated in 1983. But these are nothing like the tiny Nummulites.
That's a whale. So here's the backbone, the vertebrae, here's the ribs, shoulder, part of the front fin, and there are the jaws. This guy definitely did not live in a desert.
This incredible fossil is a Dorodon, an ancestor of modern whales, one that died out 36 million years ago.
So based on the size of these vertebrae and how much of the animal was here, it was probably about 21 feet long. This guy tells us that we were underwater, we were in the middle of an ocean.
Wadi al-Hitan is Arabic for Valley of the Whales. This 12-mile dip in the landscape has the highest concentration of fossils in the world. Some were found in the desert floor, others in the cliff wall. The count so far is 400. Almost all are marine animals. Further evidence that the Sahara was once covered by sea.
So here we've got the fossil of a baby whale. You can see the lower jaw down here with some teeth, and the shoulder, the backbone, some ribs, and all curled around. Actually, the tail comes right back to near the head.
As if finding whales in the desert wasn't intriguing enough, there's yet another mystery to be solved. A lot of the fossils are of very young Dorodons, like this one. A delicate mesh of stone helps explain why so many baby whales died in this place.
Wow, so finding that whale fossil told us we were in the ocean. These rocks actually tell us a lot more about what type of ocean we were dealing with. These are all fossilized mangrove roots.
These roots would have been below water. The mangrove trees would have risen above it.
Since trees don't grow out of the deep ocean, we know that this area was actually under shallow ocean at the time these rocks were deposited. Something probably that looked like the Florida Everglades, where there are mangroves growing now.
Smith has discovered the shoreline of the ancient sea. The shallowness of the water could explain why there were so many young animals.
So one idea, there's a bunch of these baby whale fossils found in this area, and this would have been a shallow protected bay that maybe the whales came just to birth their young. It is absolutely incredible to see a fossilized whale in a place that right now gets less than a millimeter of rainfall a year. It's as much convincing evidence for geologic change as I can imagine.
Pieces of the puzzle are coming together to reveal the Sahara's watery past.
So 40 million years ago, this desert would have been covered in the middle of this valley by a shallow bay, probably a brilliant tropical blue-green color. The shoreline would have been off along the horizon, some mangrove trees in the shallowest parts of it,
Inland would have been a vibrant combination of rainforest and swampland. The whales would have been drawn to this ancient shore because of the plentiful supply of food. But their ocean is about to vanish. Marine fossils found in Europe and Africa have evidence that this ocean stretched almost halfway around the world and connected Asia to the Atlantic. It's called the Tethys Sea. Much of the Sahara was submerged under it. The mystery is how and when this lush water world turned into the barren wasteland we see today. The answer lies not in climate patterns, but in geology. The entire African continent is underpinned by a giant piece of the Earth's crust. It's called a tectonic plate. And 40 million years ago, in what is known as the Eocene Age, it was on the moon.
So at Wadi al-Hitan, we have whales swimming around in this Eocene Ocean. All the while, the African plate is moving to the north.
Africa collides with Europe, closing the Tethys Sea. But the African plate keeps moving.
So we uplifted the northern part of Africa, and so the Tethys Sea recedes. And we've got this whole area of North Africa now emerged. It's out on land.
The whales of Wadi al-Hitan are cut off from traffic, smaller and smaller pools of water. Deadly Sahara is claimed its first victims. In the quest to discover the history of the vast Sahara Desert, geologists have so far uncovered two important clues. Sea fossils in the Great Pyramids of Egypt show these building blocks were once underwater. Whale bones reveal that a sea submerged much of the Sahara 37 million years ago. As the forces of plate tectonics pushed the Sahara out from under the sea, it created a tropical swamp. In order to figure out what made it into the wasteland visible today, scientists have to pinpoint the moment of its birth. But the clues to this mystery turn out to be hidden in the last place anyone expected.
It's actually a key clue to the formation of the Himalayas and the evolution of the rocks. It's almost like magic. When you smash a rock like this open, what it reveals inside is an absolutely beautiful fossil. This fossil is what we call an animal.
This ancient creature is part of the squid family. It's proof of a complex ecosystem found in a deep ocean.
Giant squids swimming around in the seas that once lay between India and Asia. And this is some of the key evidence that we've got. There was a major ocean between the continents.
But to find marine fossils in the high Himalayas and on the summit of Everest, some immense geological force must have pushed the ocean floor upwards, above the water. Figuring out how this happened has taken geologists over 100 years. The first lead in this investigation came from an unlikely place, Antarctica. In 1910, the renowned Antarctic explorer Robert Scott began his ill-fated expedition to the South Pole. After reaching the pole, Scott and 5 of his team died. When the bodies were discovered, among their equipment were carefully wrapped and labeled fossils. The fossils were part of an ancient plant, which specimens are preserved in the British Antarctic Survey. Soon, this humble tree fossil was found across the globe. In India, South America, Madagascar, and Australia. Researchers now had a puzzle. How had this one
Glossopteris couldn't cross oceans, then scientists were left with one conclusion. When these trees were alive 250 million years ago, the continents were all joined together. They were part of a supercontinent geologists call Gondwana land. Glossopteris was able to spread across this ancient landmass. But then, Gondwana was split up by violent tectonic forces, which pushed the continents apart. And 80 million years ago, India broke away from the supercontinent. It traveled north and eventually smashed into Asia. To get the full picture, geologists now knew they must get an exact date for this collision. Once again, they turned to marine